Now we just read the gospel, but I'm going to ask you to imagine back a few minutes to the reading from Acts. Acts is kind of the Gospel of Luke part 2, as that same author continues telling the story of the Acts of the Apostles after Jesus' resurrection. And I find today's story from Acts about these events out on the road that leads toward Gaza to be one of the more marvelous stories in Scripture. It has these cross currents of culture and space and authority and power and of belonging. And the whole thing is shot through with the wind of the Spirit. So to remind you of the setting, the treasurer of the kingdom of Cush, which is called here Ethiopia, but it's where Sudan is today, the kingdom of Cush. The treasurer of the whole kingdom was a powerful figure, right? The treasurer of a whole kingdom. And presumably he's traveling with this great retinue. He's been up to Jerusalem to worship, to visit the temple, and is headed home. And he might have been a Jew. He might have been a God-fearer, one of these people who follows the law but hasn't entered fully into Judaism. But he's close to the word. He's going along reading the words of the prophet Isaiah as he travels. Into his path comes the disciple Philip, swept by the Spirit. Philip, a relatively powerless person in the world, right? But in this strange reversal that's going on in this story, we, the readers, would know that Philip has actually more access to the religion of Judaism than this traveling, almost royalty, this treasurer, because this treasurer from Ethiopia is a eunuch. And like many religions of that time, a eunuch would have had a decreased access, would not have been allowed into the courts, even if he were a Jew, because of what had been done to his body. And so, as I said, there are these cross currents of who belongs, who has access, who has power. Luke actually identifies this traveling man more times than any of his other characteristics. He identifies him as a eunuch, the eunuch. So Luke has highlighted and means to highlight this jumble of worldly identities and to highlight the distance that exists, or so it appears, between Philip and the eunuch. But as the eunuch reads from Isaiah, the Spirit pushes Philip and says, "Go over there and join." And so Philip runs up close and says, "Do you understand what you are reading?" And the eunuch replies, "Which one of us is riding in a chariot? Which one of us has a printed copy of the scriptures of God? Which one of us is literate and is standing here reading? Who do you think understands this better?" You heard that, right? No, that's not what he says at all. But you can imagine him saying that. The Pharisees say something very similar to Jesus on more than one occasion. Who do you think you are to come in and say you have authority? It would be fully predictable for the eunuch to say that to this stranger who comes alongside, but he doesn't. Instead, he takes Philip's words as best he possibly could with a spirit of hospitality. And he says to this person just walking up to his chariot, "How can I understand unless someone guides me?" And he invites Philip up into this grand, apparently, traveling conveyance up in next to him. And they go on reading the scripture, discovering in it together, the eunuch asking more questions in return, and Philip responding by sharing with him about Jesus, the fulfillment of these scriptures. There was plenty of room for Philip and the eunuch to miss their connection on the Gaza road because of the distance that was placed between them by the world. But they both extend themselves to an encounter across difference. And when they do that, they find together deeper meaning and especially new belonging. So that when they come past some water, the eunuch says, "Look, here is water. What is to keep me from being baptized into this life of Jesus that you have introduced me to as the fulfillment of the scriptures?" And the eunuch is gathered into baptism. Philip is gathered in to see how far the gospel has gone. And then the Spirit sweeps them along. There's no victory dance. There's simply the victory of continued life. And on goes the eunuch rejoicing, and on goes Philip, sent to the next moment of proclaiming the good news. I particularly love that this scripture came along on the same Sunday as Marty was looking forward to sharing and has shared her story of going out into the world and getting to know the people of the head-to-head school, especially Jean Lubin. You spoke of Jean Lubin, Marty, who moved from Haiti to Connecticut and then started a school back in Haiti, getting swept around the globe, you might say. You spoke of a person who works in a nursing home and has founded an educational institution. These cross currents of power and authority and of what we do with our lives. You spoke about a flow of relationship because Jean got to know Lisa's aunt, who shared the news with Lisa, who shared the news with you. So it's tumbled down through all these people. We could slip this story right in, Marty, at the end of the 8th chapter of Acts. One more moment where people have gotten together on the road and God has connected across different cultures, across great distances, across different layers of access to power. It fits with Acts because of the spirit of discovery that you have held in your heart over the years, over the decades of continually seeking out the place where God's gifts call you. And it fits in the 8th chapter of Acts here because of the medium for your going deeper. Like the eunuch and Philip going deeper through the scripture, you've gone deeper through prayer and being welcomed to a different kind of prayer than you've been used to before, and being invited to see that prayer does different things does more than you had known before through your relationship with Jean. And finally, that in and through that, you found new belonging. So thank you, Marty, for bringing the road towards Gaza up into our own context. So now I'm going to send you out, all of you, send you out onto the road for a minute, send you in the whirlwind of the Spirit out into little groups, and I'm going to invite you just for 4 minutes to share, following on these questions, responding to these questions, extending yourself to these questions. What is a moment when you were far from home, even if that just meant talking to someone unlikely, like Philip and the eunuch talked together? When is a moment you were far from home, and by extending yourself, you discovered deeper belonging or deeper meaning? Or if you prefer, what is a moment when you were praying and you had a feeling of unexplainable connection to people who were far away from you in the world? A a feeling of connection through prayer. Now I will send you out. A moment far from home, extending yourself and discovering deeper belonging and meaning, or a moment of prayer connecting you across distance. Just take a couple minutes to share. Somewhere on your screen, you'll find a join button. For those of you who haven't joined one of the breakout rooms, maybe because your technology limits you or for any other reason, you're very welcome to share here as you like. And I'm going to turn off the recording if you're watching this later. God bless you as you hold these questions in your heart.